Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is May Day. It's May 1st, 2023. Can't believe we got here, but I am certainly glad that we arrived. May is sometimes referred to as delicate-footed May, and that is referring to a quote by Nathaniel Parker Willis that says, "The spring is here, the delicate-footed May, with its slight fingers full of leaves and flowers, and with it comes a thirst to be away in lovelier scenes, to pass these sweeter hours." Well, I was in a lovely scene earlier today when I took Max for a walk. We ended up in a nature area that is behind a high school that's near my house. And we like to go in that area because behind the high school is a tennis court. And so all of the errant tennis balls end up in the woods. And so Max likes to find them. And then I collect a few of them and bring them home with us. So we're scouting for tennis balls. And this time of year, we're also looking for spring ephemerals. So those spring flowers that are so fleeting in the month of May. And I'm happy to report that we actually stumbled on some today. I saw Hepatica americana, little white flowers and sometimes a little purple. I took some pictures, but they are so little. They're very, very dainty, and they just kind of pop up on the forest floor right among the leaf litter. So if you're not paying attention, you can miss it. But I've stumbled on this little patch of them, and they were just as happy as can be. The sun was coming through the trees, so lots of dappled sunshine. And when I did a little research on them, here's what I found. They are an early blooming wildflower that can be blue or white or pink. And so I guess mine that I saw were kind of a white or a pink. But they're most often found in woodlands that have rich organic soil. And they start blooming in mid-March in the southern part of their range, and then mid-May in the northernmost areas. And so I'm assuming that Minnesota is one of their northernmost ranges. Oh, and then here's a fun fact. The flowers close at night and also on rainy days. Isn't that sweet? So Hepatica americana. But anyway, today is May Day. So May Day is a huge celebration around the world. May Day has traditionally marked the beginning of summer. Of course, in modern times, today is a day when flower baskets, little baskets or cones of flowers, are exchanged and left for your neighbors on their doorstep. In England, dating back to the 16th century, there is a celebration where they follow a green man who then leads the townspeople in a parade welcoming summer. In France, one of my favorite May Day traditions, they are celebrating the lily of the valley, which is one of their most famous floral symbols. And you can see lily of the valley everywhere when you are in France. You'll see it on street corners. And then, of course, the fragrance is the foundation for so many different perfumes and fragrances. So love lily of the valley. Although I know for gardeners, it can be very invasive. So you have to be strategic about how and where you will use lily of the valley. So keep that in mind. Now, if you're in Hawaii, May Day is actually Lay Day. And so this is a day when they celebrate the garlands of flowers that they give out as a symbol of hello or farewell, or just for any old celebration. It is the spirit of aloha. So Lay Day, and that was started back in 1927. Now, in Haiti, May 1st is traditionally a day to celebrate agriculture. And so on May Day, Haitians celebrate farmers and the importance of planting crops and trees, and of course, gardens. Now, speaking of agriculture, I heard an interesting May Day statistic. This little fun fact was shared with regard to Nebraska soybeans. May 1st is a critical date. Research has shown that for every day that soybeans aren't in the ground after May 1st, farmers lose between 1/4 and 5/8 of a bushel every single day in yield. So May 1st, a critical day for soybean farmers. Now, for May, there are 2 different birth flowers. There's the lily of the valley, which makes sense. The lily of the valley symbolizes sweetness and happiness, or happy days coming back to you. And then the other flower that is a May birth flower is the hawthorn. And the hawthorn represents hope. So 2 great flowers for a birthday bouquet. Finally, here, before we get into botanical history, I wanted to share a little passage with you from David Grann. This is an excerpt from his book called Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. Fascinating book. But in any case, there's this little passage in the book where he's talking about the month of May and the moon, and of course, springtime ephemerals. And so I thought it was really interesting. And so I wanted to share that with you here really quick. So it goes like this. In May, when coyotes howl beneath an unnervingly large moon, taller plants, such as spiderworts and black-eyed Susans, begin to creep over the tinier blooms, stealing their light and water. The necks of the smaller flowers break, and their petals flutter away, and before long, they are buried underground. This is why the Osage Indians refer to May as the time of the flower-killing moon. And of course, that inspired the title of the book, this little passage here. So anyway, fascinating, isn't it, to think about the way flowers come and go and how they dominate each other and take over one another. And it's kind of a battle of wills out there in the garden. And it all kicks off this month with sometimes very dainty little flowers like liverworts or hepaticas. So there you go. All right, let's get to today's garden history. Today in garden history, we kick things off with the birthday of Karl Friedrich von Gaertner, who had a fantastic name, by the way. Gaertner translates to gardener, and he was indeed a gardener. Karl was actually a second-generation gardener. His dad was Joseph Gaertner, the great German botanist and horticulturist. And so Karl was stepping in his father's footsteps, essentially. But his claim to fame was his work with hybrids, with hybridizing plants. There were other botanists doing this work that laid the foundation for Gregor Mendel to come along in his work with peas and recessive and dominant genes and all of that good stuff. So Karl Friedrich von Gaertner. And today we also remember Phebe Hensdale Brown. She's a fabulous little poet that I love. She was a gardener. She loved plants, but she was born on this day, May 1st, back in 1783. And one of the poems that she wrote was called A Song of May. And it starts out, "What song hast thou, sweet May, for me? My listening ear, what song for thee?" And then it goes on, but I wanted to share the second verse with you because this is how you know that Phebe loved plants, because she really does touch on so many of the superstars of May. And so she talks here, she says, From blossoms pure with petals white, as pressed from out the moonbeam's light, the fragrant lily of the vale, so lily of the valley there, the violet's breath on passing gale, anemones mid last year's leaves, arbutus sweet in trailing wreaths, from waving lights of forest glade, the light ferns hiding neath the shade. And then she goes on from there. But just in that one verse, she's touching on so many of the great spring beauties. So the lily of the valley, violets, anemones, the mayflower, also known as the trailing arbutus, and then of course ferns. We've got fern fronds popping out. And so this all happens very quickly, doesn't it? We go from leaf litter and brown and drab and dreary to just incredible, just beautiful little blossoms. And today we remember Thomas Hoy, the English gardener and horticulturist and botanist. He died on this day, May 1st, in 1822. Thomas was the head gardener for the Duke of Northumberland. He was a dedicated gardener. He served the Duke for over 4 decades. So his entire life, he worked with plants. He was a fellow of the Linnean Society, and he liked to show his work at various plant societies and outings. He's remembered as an experienced botanist and an able cultivator. He was very good at his job. In fact, he was so good that the botanist Robert Brown named a popular plant genus for Thomas Hoy. Can you guess what it is? Well, if you were thinking Hoya, then you win the prize. You guessed correctly. So what a wonderful way to be remembered and honored with such a beautiful plant, the Hoya. I love Hoyas. I picked up a couple of variegated Hoyas over the winter, and I'm so excited about that because I've had a dark, solid green one with the classic pink, waxy flowers. But these variegated ones, I want to see what the flower looks like. But in any case, I digress. It's a gorgeous plant, and it's named for an intelligent and thoughtful and dedicated gardener by the name of Thomas Hoy, who died on this day when he was 72 years old. All right, and it was on this day, May 1st, back in 1867, that Ralph Waldo Emerson inscribed one of his books to Sophie Thoreau, the devoted sister of Henry David Thoreau. And so Ralph Waldo Emerson gifted Sophie with his book, May Day, which has many of his works, including his poem that says, "Why chidest thou the tardy spring?" In other words, why are you mad that spring is late? Don't be mad about that. I thought this was very sweet. This actual post was shared by a library that showed the inscription, so you get to see Ralph Waldo Emerson's beautiful handwriting. And then about a decade later, Sophie turns around and gives the book to her friend Mabel Loomis. And so she also inscribes the book as well. But if you're looking for a sentimental month of May gift, maybe you have a May birthday or something like that, and you really want to give something special, look for an old copy of May Day by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Special treat. Well, it turns out that May 1st is a great day to release a brand new gardening book. And so I thought I'd wrap up today's botanical history with 3 great garden books that have been released on May 1st. The first one came out May 1st in 2001. And this book is called The Himalayan Garden by Jim German. And this is a lovely book. It's a little eclectic. So if you're into growing mountain plants, alpine plants, wildflowers, and things like that, if you have a cold climate, especially, I think you'll enjoy this book. But this book talks about growing plants from the roof of the world, the Himalayan garden. Really fun book. All right, the second book that I wanted to share is called Monet's Palette Cookbook. The subtitle is The Artist and His Kitchen Garden at Giverny by Eileen Boardman. And this is a beautiful book. It has to be. She's writing about Monet. But I also particularly enjoy how wonderfully she incorporates Monet's kitchen garden. So just a fantastic book. That's another great one. And then on May 1st, 2018, there is a great book that came out called Herbal Medicine for Beginners. This book is a sentimental favorite for me because I interviewed the author a long time ago, but her name is Katja Swift. She is a delight. And the subtitle for this book is Your Guide to Healing Common Ailments with 35 Medicinal Herbs. And it was that talk that I had with Katja Swift all those years ago that got me tiptoeing into herbal medicine and experimenting with different herbs to improve my health and to improve the health of my family. But 3 good book recommendations here. May Day releases: The Himalayan Garden, Monet's Palette Cookbook, and Herbal Medicine for Beginners. And I'll put a link to all 3 in today's show notes. It's time for today's book. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Emily's Fresh Kitchen by Emily Maxon. Well, this book came out in January of last year, and the subtitle is Cook Your Way to Better Health. Well, I have to be honest and let you know that I stumbled on this book at my local Goodwill, and I was immediately taken with it. I think it's fantastic, and I can't believe that I missed it last year. So I'm playing catch up here, but the cover is, first of all, what captivated me because it's got a great soup on the cover. It's her roasted butternut with sage soup that's infused with coconut cream. So yeah, I bet it's amazing. It sure makes for a pretty cover. And I have to say that all of the pictures in this book are beautiful. But I wanted to read a little bit to you about Emily because her story is what has inspired so much of her work. And she writes, after a Crohn's disease diagnosis at age 28 and more than a decade of unsuccessful traditional treatment, Emily Maxon discovered the positive effects of the specific carbohydrate diet and the transformative power of food to improve health. She's a trained chef, and she poured her heart into creating delectable dishes that meet her diet's rigorous guidelines. So the diet that she's following is the specific carbohydrate diet, if you haven't heard about it. But Emily is an expert, and for her, the diet has led to a healthier and happier life overall. Now, if you're curious about this and you can't wait to get the book, make sure you head on over to her website, Emily's Fresh Kitchen. It's the same as the title of the book. You will find a wonderful array of recipes and inspiring stories and photos. So it all goes together, and she just does a top-notch job. Now, with regard to this specific carbohydrate diet, I want to share a little bit more because I know you're probably curious about it, but this is a largely plant-based diet, which is great for gardeners who want to eat fresh from the garden. And here's what she writes about it. This is on page 9 of her book, and the heading here is How I Eat Today. She writes, following this diet, I cooked myself out of disease and into good health. While the diet was strict, the results were miraculous. It was such a blessing not to have to take medications or to spend time in hospitals. My gut was healthy again, and I was able to start introducing foods that were not allowed while following the diet. And so she says, today I strive for my diet to be 80% plant-based. I focus on fiber, and I try to get a variety of plant foods in my diet daily, including some gluten-free whole grains. And that is what is working for her. So great cookbook with lots of ideas. I thought what I would do is just walk you through the chapters here so you know what's in this cookbook. Ooh, I see she signed my copy. So this is a really nice one. But anyway, here's what she writes. She does a quick overview of what's in her pantry. She talks about her favorite kitchen tools. I love the gadgets. I love her tips on this. She's got a great section on salads and then main dishes, soups and sides, breakfasts and smoothies. That's a really important section for me because I always feel like if I can nail down what I'm having for breakfast, then the whole rest of the day goes well for me. Appetizers and savory snacks. That's always good too. In fact, I've been looking for some savory things that I can eat in the evening. So I'm going to be checking this out. Sweets and treats, and then condiments, dressings, spice blends. So that's really important too, especially if you're going plant-based, because you don't want to lose the flavor. And then drinks and cocktails. So pretty thorough, but this is an entire lifestyle for her. She's really mastered this, and she can use her own story as a testament to the fact that it does work. Cook your way to better health. This book is 284 pages of nutritious and flavorful dishes that will help heal your body and get you back on the road to health. You can get a copy of Emily's Fresh Kitchen, Cook Your Way to Better Health by Emily Maxon, and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $25. Great gift book too, by the way. If you're looking for a good garden to table cookbook, Emily's would be a good pick. All right, we end the show today with a sweet little look back at the diary of Kelvin Fletcher, who wrote these words on May 1st in 1859. This is a most delightful Sabbath morn, and the anniversary of my leaving Westford, Massachusetts in 1817, 42 years ago. It's also the anniversary of my alliance to my sainted wife in 1821, 38 years ago today. Both days of great beauty and loveliness. And then listen to what he wrote here. This morn I worked my garden and retrospected the past. So he's reminiscing, he's thinking back. He writes, brought up the innumerable reasons for gratitude for the undeserved blessings that I have enjoyed. All nature seemed to accord to my strain of thought. Then he says, Mrs. F. and I went to Wesley Chapel to hear E. preach from the Canticles or the Solomon Songs. He quotes one of them, the winter is past and the time of singing of birds has come. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening to The Daily Gardener. I hope you get a chance to do some retrospecting in the garden, thinking about some good, happy times. And also listening to birdsong, listening to sounds from the birds that you haven't heard in a season or two. And it's always such a pleasant surprise to hear them on the wind. And don't forget that you also have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.